Okay, this is now the 5-minute tarot for the 19th of March 2017. And I'm calling it the 5-minute tarot, but this is not going to take 5 minutes. It's more like the 5-hour tarot or a 5-day tarot. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I like to start and keep going until I finish. I don't want to have to edit stuff. So I've got ideas of, or I know the order in which I want to present the different kinds of information. So I've got a note, and I'm going to try and follow that list. But the video is going to be too long, so I'm probably going to split it into smaller bits. So I may end up, there may be a sudden end, but we'll see when we get to that. Also, I'm really aware that I'm leaving out a lot of, this is partly because I'm not sure what your questions or what your objections are or will be. It's easy with a card because we know we've got a common starting point to understand. So we talk about what the card represents. But with this, I really don't know what the starting point is. But at the same time, I'm not trying to convince you of anything, because this is more of an exploration of ideas about why we're here or what we're here for. So I want to tell you a few things that I've come across and I've found interesting and useful. So if I can share them with you, it can be a starting point for more discussion. So if you have questions or comments or disagreements, you can let me know in the comments, and maybe something will come out of this. Or maybe you'll stop watching these videos. I don't know. Only because I've got, it's one thing to, when you try to explain, or when you try to pass on to somebody else what you think, it can make a lot of sense in your own head, but when you actually try to pass it on to somebody else, you maybe discover that it's not quite as logical or sensible, or doesn't make quite as much sense as you thought. So I'm kind of wondering how this is going to go. But anyway, some people say that life is a bitch and then you die, right? That's you may have heard that, and that's true for some people, right? It's Thomas Hobbes said, he was famous for writing that life is nasty, brutish, and short, because that was his take on life and its possibilities, although he was, 1750, something like that. Okay, so for me, I don't think that life has to be like that. And I want to give you a few ideas that ideally will change the context of the situation that you find yourself in, so you can make more sense of it and do more with your current situation, no matter what your situation is. So this is my take on, my take right now, today, of what's going on with life, so we can understand more correctly. And also so that we can be free from illness and conflict and stress, and live more in harmony with ourselves, and create stuff and produce stuff. Whatever that may be for all of us. I'm not saying we should all produce the same thing or all create the same thing, but so what makes sense for me doesn't have to make sense for you. But I want to show, or try to show, not only that we can have what we want, because that's the thing that I mentioned in various videos, we can have what we want, but I want to look at a couple of explanations or reasons why we can, how we can have what we want, and why we can have what we want, so that we can put what we believe, or put our beliefs on a sound footing. Because people think that you can, or people tell you that you can decide what you want, make a list, and then you can kind of will stuff into existence. But I don't think that works. So you can't write out a list of things that you want, and you read it. They say read it every day and reprogram your subconscious mind, and it's going to manipulate conditions to bring you what you want. And that's a kind of typical or regular New Age type of approach to living better or living more fully. But I don't think it works. And if you've ever tried it, you know it doesn't work. Because that's not what's going on, that we use our willpower to bring things about. What we're supposed to, what's going on is we're meant to recognize what already is. There is wholeness, there is oneness. And I'll get to that. But when you recognize the wholeness that exists, you can participate in it. And that's how you get what you want. Okay, so I'm also saying, I want to say we can have what we want because we're human beings. And Leonardo da Vinci and Goethe were people too, and we're people. And we likewise can produce quality. Maybe not to the same extent that they did, but in our own way we can produce quality. And if we focus on producing quality, we benefit ourselves and other people too. You might like to take a look at Robert Pirsig's Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, because that's all about quality. And this confused state he got into by trying to figure out what quality is. So this whole starting point for doing something about wholeness and the all, it began with a conversation with a young woman. She's 33 or something. She has cancer. And so I was talking to her and she told me she had cancer. And I thought, this is wrong. You know, people at that age ought not to be having cancer. I mean, older people ought not to have cancer either. So anyway, she tells me she's got cancer. And I asked her what she was doing, and she said that she was going to various doctors and oncologists and specialists, but she was also mainly praying. She's a staunch Catholic, and she prays a lot. And praying ought to work, but it wasn't. So I suggested to her that maybe her prayer wasn't actually working that well. So I told her some ideas that might make it. I wasn't attacking her, and I'm sympathetic. But at the same time, if you're doing something and it's not getting the results that you want, you know, do something else, try something else, and it might make a difference. Okay, so what I'm passing on to you, these ideas are not mine, but they might be true for all of us. And they might allow us to make some changes to produce better or more desirable results. Because in a lot of ways, it's about cause and effect. If you don't like the effect, you don't try and change the effect, you change the cause. So the woman didn't like the fact that she had this cancerous problem. But instead of working on the problem, figure out what's causing it or what the reason is, and make some changes there, and you're going to get a different effect. But when I'm mentioning what's the cause, I don't mean the material cause. You know, you've got this gene and you've got that gene and you've got body chemistry. And the thing is, if you work on the apparent problem, that's working on the outside, or it's working on the effect and not the cause. And I'll get into this a little bit as we go through this about causes and effects. Because we know that our state of mind and our thinking affects our body to some extent, right? Because you know that if you're feeling miserable, you feel the need to drink, let's say, or so we know that our thoughts affect our mental state, affects our physical state to some extent, but maybe our mental state affects our physical state 100%. So it's not that the body has its own wisdom and our mind has its own power, but maybe it's all mental, than that the body does not have wisdom of its own. Which you have to think, if the body were that wise, how come it's tricked by disease, let's say. Okay. So maybe we live in a world of thought, a world of mind. So if we straighten our thinking, we change the conditions we experience. And then when you see the connection and the logic between how we think and what happens to us, we can have harmony, whatever harmony might mean to each of us individually. So this is supposed to be a 5-minute tarot, and I don't know how long I've gone on, but more than 5 minutes at this point. So if I cut the video into bits at the end of a sentence, it means we've got reasonably sized chunks. Okay, so back to the young woman who prays. The word pray comes from a root that means to ask or to ask for. So when you're praying, you're asking, or you're asking for something. But if you pray to some deity that you think might want to punish you, and people do that, they think that God is love, but also God's, got it in for you, and you've got to be obedient, you've got to obey, and if you don't, you're going to get punished. So if you've got the belief that this divine being is going to punish you if you step out of line, then you're praying from a position of weakness and fear, and you get that back. Because, as somebody once said to me, we get back what we give out. And that's true. So if we get back what we give out, if we change what we give out, we're going to get different stuff back. So if we don't like what we're getting back, the solution is to change what we're giving out. It's cause and effect. And then at the end of Abbey Road, the Beatles, they're saying, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. So it's true enough. Okay, so I don't pray. I don't know if I ask for that much either. But years ago, I'd finished university and I was going to go to Jordan Hill, which is teacher training college in Glasgow, and I didn't want to go. I mean, I was going to go because I couldn't think of what else to do. And I had this summer job guarding Govan Gasworks, all those G's. And it was one rainy night, and I was sitting in I had to go on a round of different points and turn a clock to prove that I had been there and so on. So I would rush around, and then I would sit in a truck for an hour and go around again. And it was raining, and I thought, I don't want to go to Jordan Hill. I'm going to find the first job I can find anywhere in the world, and I'm going to take it, and I'm going to go. I'm going to get out of this country because I hated it. Anyway, so I made this decision at probably 2 a.m, and I looked in the London Times the next day. They wanted history teachers in Switzerland. I phoned them up, got the papers, had an interview and got the job, and moved to Switzerland in the beginning of September 1973. So since then, I've had ups and downs, but, I never looked back. So it's as if everything fell into place. Once I made the decision about what I was going to do, everything fell into place. And it all happened easily. And it happened without much effort on my part. I mean, I had to make the phone call and fill in the form, but the actual development happened on its own, or it took place. So maybe we could make a science of this getting what we want, so that we can get what we want and live more fully, or live more in harmony with our own purpose, or our own self, or our bigger self. So I need to mention etymology, because etymology is about the roots and the meanings, the basic meaning of words. So there's an Indo-Sumerian root, R, A-R, and that means to arrange harmoniously, right? So words that have A-R in them, like art. Art means arranging things harmoniously. The word harmony that we know contains the A-R root, meaning harmoniously. So if we're going to arrange our lives harmoniously, and the thing is, when we arrange things harmoniously, we in some way tune in with the greater harmony of the whole. And that's why things work. Is because not because, or they work because our thinking is harmonious, but it's also in sync with true or greater harmony. And if we can make a smaller version of harmony, then things work. So if we're going to change, or if we're going to arrange our own lives harmoniously, we probably should get an idea of the pieces that we're dealing with. So that because we want to arrange things harmoniously, so we need to know what pieces we're dealing with, as well as the rules for how to combine them. So I'd like to discuss a little bit about where we are and what we are. So where we are, I know we're on planet Earth revolving around the sun in the part of the Milky Way, but it's more like you right now, and maybe you're in London or New York or something like that, but it's also where is our consciousness, where is our thinking, and also what are we actually? I know we're people and we seem to live and die, but we've also got ideas, we've got great artists, and we've got leaders and politicians and liars and so on. So what is mankind? And if we can understand what man is and what he's capable of and what his purpose is or what he's here for, then we're in a stronger position to make a lot of the possibilities that we have. So we've got questions like what are we and where are we? And we can try to answer these questions by ourselves or from within our own current understanding or based on our current consciousness, meaning that we're aware of certain things. And so we try to build the big picture from our present, more limited understanding. But the problem is we've all been damaged to some extent and upset and hurt and been confused and not knowing quite what to do, or we've taken a wrong tack and we've got mixed up. So if we start trying to answer questions like what are we and where do we come from our own current understanding, we're going to get a skewed version of the truth. It may be 50% or 95% correct, but it's not going to be 100% correct. And I think we ought to aim for perfection. So I'm going to suggest that we look for something in written texts that have been around for a long time. So, and the reason I'm saying this is if something has been around for a long, long time, for hundreds of years, it's probably lasted because it was true or because it had great depth or it points to some perennial truth. And I kind of like the word perennial because per means through and throughout, and ennial comes from annual. So perennial means it has lasted throughout the years. And I'm going to refer to a couple of bits in the Bible. Not that I'm religious, and not that I want you to become religious. Or religion just means to retie understanding. But anyway, somebody once said to Bob Dylan, what's the greatest book ever written? And he said the Bible. And then he said, okay, what's the worst book ever written? And he said the Bible. And so this may have been Bob being witty or clever. But it's also true because the Bible's got some great stuff in it, but it's also got some horrible stuff in it. So I'd like to pick and choose a bit. And I'm going to suggest the beginning of Genesis, mainly, because the Bible begins, Genesis begins, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. So in the beginning, we tend to think that that means that the Bible is supposedly telling us about the beginning of time. So we really ought not to take it seriously. So in the beginning, it seems to be, or it's generally considered, that the beginning of Genesis is this fictitious account of the early universe, but we know it's the Big Bang, or so they say. But maybe in the beginning means the first thing you need to know is, right? So when our starting point ought to be, or maybe our starting point should be, that God created the heavens and the earth, whatever that might mean. So this is a tarot class thing. So when we say in the beginning, it might be referring to time, but it might be referring to something else, because there's more than one way to read sentences, and we tend to see what we want to see, or we assume that that our interpretation of the words is the correct one. And this is the value of cards and reading cards, because they exercise the mind and they exercise our imagination, and you get out of the habit of feeble thinking, which I probably am not going to come back to, but it's interesting to think that most thinking that people do is feeble, partly because they think that they're weak, or that they're operating from a position of weakness. And I want to say and show that we're actually operating from a position of ultimate strength. So nothing is impossible to us. Okay, so the reason I'm talking about in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, is that the word create comes from a root that means to bring into focus, which I think is really interesting. So it's not like there was nothing. So when God created the heavens and the earth, it wasn't like there was nothing and then suddenly there was something. That's not what create means and what creation means. Heaven and earth were already there. And the change that took place by creation was there became awareness on the part of this divine being. So when God created, it wasn't like this person or this thing did something. It was more, there was a change in awareness, a change in consciousness. So we might think, instead of God as being a person, we might think of the creative being as consciousness. And because we're created in the image and likeness of God, so we're told, we too have consciousness. And we share the consciousness that brought into focus the heavens and the earth. So we can do great things. So if we are creating, or if we want to create, so let's say you want wealth, or you want perfect health. If you think that it's not there and you need to bring it about in some way, this is not right. You may get some result, but it's not really what's going on. So if you want to create wealth or perfect health, if we realize what we're doing is all we need to do, I say all, but it's not maybe easy. Actually, it is easy, but we get in our own way. So we should realize we're bringing into focus, not into existence, we're bringing into focus what already exists. And I think it's a really exciting idea. New Age books and authors kind of say that in their own way, because they recommend that you act as if you already had the thing that you want. Right? So if you want wealth, you act as if you're already wealthy, and this helps to bring it about, or it changes your expectations in your subconscious mind, and so you end up wealthy. So I think we need more than this, because if you act as if you're wealthy, but you know you're not, you know you're pretending, so you disbelieve what you think, what you're supposed to be believing, and you get in your own way. And because we're made in the image and likeness of God, we are incredibly powerful, but we don't realize it. But it means that the contradictions that we create by our beliefs are really powerful contradictions. And so thinking things are going to go badly and really believing that, you know, we're up against it and the odds are that things are going to fall apart anyway, you put that together, that belief and that idea together with incredible power, and you've got, you know, bad things happen. So this idea of believing that you've got something and acting as if you already have it, it needs something more for us to have confidence that this is actually what's going on. So back to the woman with cancer, the young woman with cancer. It's not so. For her, it's not that she has cancer and has to get rid of it using positive thought or willpower. That can maybe bring some results. And it's being positive and having positive thoughts is better than being negative and assuming the worst and helping to bring about problems. But I think because creation means to bring into focus, if she can in some way bring into focus the self that she already is, that is harmonious, or that is arranged correctly, then the health that she already has is there. But the problem is, can she see it? Or can she recognize it or be conscious of it? Conscious means con is completely, and sciere, a Latin verb that means to know. So consciousness is knowing fully. So can she know fully the truth of her origin and be true to it and be harmonious? So I need to read you some Shakespeare. This is Sonnet 29. I'll put it on screen. I'm telling you this because it's brilliant, and I refer back to it later. So the poem reads, when, in disgrace with fortune and men's eyes, I all alone beweep my outcast state, and trouble deaf heaven with my bootless cries, and look upon myself, and curse my fate, wishing me like to one more rich in hope, featured like him with friends possessed, desiring this man's art and that man's scope, with what I most enjoy contented least, yet in these thoughts myself almost despising, haply I think on thee, and then my state, like to the lark at break of day arising from sullen earth, sings hymns at heaven's gate, for thy sweet love remembered such wealth brings, that then I scorn to change my state with kings. Which you have to agree is fabulous. And I come back to this later, partly because we can understand. It's like if you understand what Shakespeare's getting at, that the love that you feel can change depression into confidence, then the reason you can understand it and enjoy it is because you too are like that. So you take some white supremacist in South Africa in 1960 who believes that natives, local people, black people are inferior. You know, that's a whole state of mind and a whole consciousness. And Sonnet 29 is not going to make any sense to that person because they don't have the consciousness. Okay, so what are we? What are people? If creation means to bring into focus, we always existed. We're not some paltry animal that has to struggle to survive, even if it seems that way at times. Okay, so where are we? We're told that God brought the heavens and the earth into focus. He created. So it would seem that there is a consciousness that includes everything. So it includes us. And because it includes us, we have to be of the nature of the author. At this point, I'm wondering, I know I'm jumping around a bit and maybe leaving out certain important points, but I just have to go with this and see where it leads. So, what if we are within some kind of if there is this consciousness that is the all that brought into focus the heavens and the earth, then I want to say that if there is this divine consciousness and we're part of it, that means that all knowledge and understanding is available or accessible to us. If we know how to add, we know how to add anything, even if we've never added it before. So, and that may be the way to think about divine consciousness. Instead of this trying to create a picture of what divine consciousness is, maybe think of the rules of arithmetic or the rules of addition. But they're larger or more inclusive. You know the principle, you know the method, so you know everything connected with that principle. And you can apply it in ways that you haven't applied yet, but you can have confidence that the rule works. And so you can get the correct answer. Because in this way, we start with wholeness, we start with the principle, and we don't start with our limited point of view, because we can think, okay, 2 and 2 is 4, but what about two elephants and another 2 elephants? Is that still 4 elephants? But when you understand the principle, you can have confidence that the method works. I have to mention this, but I don't know why, but it occurred to me when I was making my notes about the order in which to present the information. I wrote down sin at this point. And so I want to say that sin does not refer to doing bad stuff that you're punished for and you're a horrible person. But sin means thinking that you are or can be separate from this wholeness. And that's all. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It means that you aren't in harm, or you've stepped out of harmony with the idea of completeness. And because you're not in harmony with it, things don't work the way they ought to. Okay, I'm getting a little bit lost here. Anyway, so let me go back to, I wrote down school services. So when I was at high school, we used to go to church service at Christmas and Easter, and we'd have this minister talk to us and give us pep talks. Anyway, and my wife's family, or their in-laws, are Anglican, so I've been to enough Anglican funerals. So I'm familiar with the so-called Lord's Prayer, and you may be too. Even though I have to say that I think a lot of what the interpretation they give, they just don't get what's going on with it. That's not ego. It's just like it's a bit like people just repeat what they were told and don't spend that much time considering what the words mean. So there is this bit in the Lord's Prayer, hallowed be thy name. So I looked up hallowed, and hallowed means holy. And holy comes from a root that means whole, W-H-O-L-E. So holy just means whole. It's not about morality or adopting a moral position, or that holy is something that's better or more desirable or more valuable, and you've got to in some way earn whatever the benefits you get from being holy. Holy means whole, and it's about recognizing the all, the everything that there is. Okay, so there's an all or a wholeness of which we are part. And if we consider the nature of this wholeness, it has to be harmonious, because everything has to fit together and doesn't conflict or go to war or destroy. Because there's a fellow, C.C. Zane, talked about the pole star and how the pole star, because it doesn't move, it doesn't change. I mean, obviously it moves, but it's so far away that as we look at it, it seems to be fixed, a fixed position in the sky. And because it doesn't change, it represents truth. So there's something about truth that it doesn't change. So the whole can't change. It has to be perfect. And if it's perfect, it doesn't need to change. But if you had the perfect state were not arranged harmoniously, it would change. So it wouldn't be whole anymore. There would be something outside it or beyond it. But then it wouldn't be the whole anymore. Okay, so to recap, kind of, creation means to bring into focus. It was already there, but it wasn't recognized, or whatever this being was, it wasn't aware of it. So God means a state of consciousness. He's not an old man in the sky that we have to be afraid of, or who's just waiting for us to step out of line so he can crush us or punish us. There is no punishment except what we do to ourselves. There's this story about Buddhist monks that I like, and I've mentioned it before, but I'd like to mention it at this point. So you got these two Buddhist monks, and they come to this, they're on a journey back to wherever they're going. And they come across this river, and there's this half-naked woman at the side of the river, and she says, "Can you help me across the river?" So one of the monks picks her up and carries her across and puts her down, and they continue on their way. And after 3 days of walking, the second monk says to this first one, "How could you do that? How could you pick up that? You know we're not supposed to have anything to do with women. How did you pick her up and carry her across the river?" And the first monk says, "Are you still carrying her? I left her at the other side of the river 3 days ago." So we by our thinking and our interpretation of what's going on, we create problems. And we think they're real, but they're not really. They're of our own invention, they're of our own making. So Jean-Paul Sartre said, hell is other people. L'enfer, c'est les autres. Hell is other people. But actually hell is of our own making. So there's heaven, which is harmony. And then there's what we do to it and how we misunderstand it and misinterpret it and make it disharmonious. Okay, so there's a verb to sing, and that gives us singing, right? Present participle. Play gives us playing. Present tense. So the verb to be gives us being. So when you think of the divine being, you're thinking of the present participle of the verb to be. So the divine being is action, or acting in the moment, in the present. So the divine being is not a thing or a person. And also, we've been created in the image and likeness of this divine being, this present participle of the verb to be. And maybe that's why when we are in the moment and enjoying everything right now, that things flow. Okay, so we're told, hallowed be thy name, right? Now, hallowed is holy, and holy is whole. So somehow there is wholeness. And so when we think of this divine consciousness, we are meant to understand it's whole, it's complete, it's the all. And we can represent this by a circle. If there's wholeness, there can't be anything outside of it, or it wouldn't be whole. So there's the all or the everything, and it includes everything, and there's nothing outside it. And at the same time, this wholeness has to be perfect and harmonious, because otherwise it would destroy itself and it would cease to be whole. And that's where we come from. There was a French writer, Voltaire. I think it was Voltaire who wrote Candide. And Candide was I read it at university, didn't understand a word of it, and just didn't get any of it. But anyway, so thinking back on it now, the thing about Candide was he represented the person who believed that this is the best of all possible worlds, and he would go through life, or he would have experiences, and he would be presented with terrible disruption and terrible disease and earthquakes and autodafés, and he would still insist that this is the best of all possible worlds. And Voltaire was trying to point out that we've got problems and we've got horrible world. So the screen went funny there, and I had to stop. So I'll pick up where I left off. So Voltaire was trying to show that this is not the best of all possible worlds. But the problem is, the world that Voltaire was describing is a reflection. So the world that we're in is a reflection. It's a world of fiction. So imagine this divine whole being, right? So what do you do? If you're the divine being, what do you do? What does it do? You can't go beyond yourself or move outside yourself. So the divine state, the supreme consciousness, let's say, is all potential. And it is, right? But it's present tense, and it's all blissful, and it's nirvana, but it's also not doing anything. So if you're wholeness and you can't be more whole than you already are, what do? And all you can do is reflect yourself. And this can be the semicircle that is part of the symbol for Mercury. Because you've got wholeness, and it can't be more than what it already is. It can only be a reflection. It can only reflect itself back. And this is the world that we live in. It's a world of reflection. As if we're in the mirror, but we mistake what's in the mirror for the reality that's being reflected. So we go back to cause and effect again. So if you see a flower in a mirror and you want to change the flower, you don't scratch around the surface of the mirror trying to remove it, because that's the effect, and there's no point, there's no success in trying to change the effect. What you do is you change the flower, you change what's the original object, and so you get a different reflection. So if we're in a world of reflection, then if we recognize that this is a reflection and not the cause, we need to work with the real cause. So if you remember the symbol for Mercury, which is the symbol of man, from the last video, it's made up of a cross, a circle, and a semicircle. So I realize this next bit may be making stuff up, but okay, if we start with the 0, which represents the all, there's no beginning or no end, right? So it's unaffected by time, and it's unaffected by the passage of time. So there's eternity. So if we take this 0 and look at it from the side, we see a straight line. So this can be the active principle because it's upright. And then, so we've got the number 1 as well. I'm not explaining this. It's partly because we've got 1 is unity. But to get beyond unity, you have to go to 2. And 2 represents the reflection of unity. So 2 isn't really a number. 1 is unity, 2 is its reflection, and 3 is the first number. But 2 is reflection. And the number 2, as you'll see, I'm going to put it on screen, is a semicircle and a straight line. So we've got the reflection and we've got the straight line. So if you take the number 1, which is upright and active, and you combine it with the horizontal line in the number 2, you've got the passive. So you've got life on earth, so sometimes you're standing up, sometimes you're lying down, the cross. Sometimes you're active, upright, and sometimes you're passive, horizontal. So you put together the circle, the cross, and the semicircle from allness, unity, and its reflection. You get the symbol for man. You get the symbol for Mercury, which is the number of man. So you make of this explanation what you will, because I understand it one way. And the word understand is interesting as well, because the under in understand doesn't mean underneath. But to understand probably literally means to stand in the midst of. Right? So the under is not underneath, but it's the midst of. And the ST part relates to standing. So you get the summer solstice, the sun stands still. So we have understanding. So you stand in the midst of something. So what I stand in the midst of is going to be different from what you stand in the midst of. But when we understand something, we're in it or within it, and we're part of it. And that can be how we can understand Sonnet 29, because the love that's remembered that changes our understanding or changes our state of mind is within our own consciousness. We understand it because we too stand within the poem. Okay, so I was thinking about the young woman at one point, and I was going to ask her, I was imagining talking to her, what I would say or what I might be able to say to her. And I was going to, at one point I found myself thinking, what did they do to you? I was going to ask her, what did they do to you that made you fearful? That maybe allowed the cancer to manifest? Because, I mean, we're all damaged to some extent. So what did they do to, so I'm thinking, what did they do to you? But the thing is, if we think this way, that people can do bad things to us, then thinking that way, we're in the reflection. We're in the mirror. We're no longer in the all that is harmonious. But when we realize or recognize that the problems that we do, the problems that we experience, we do to ourselves. They're not done to us. And because what happens is what we do to ourselves, then we can make good things happen to ourselves as well. And the choice is ours. So I found myself thinking about repeating. So heaven and earth was already in existence. And we too were already in existence and were brought into focus. So the young woman, if her starting point is she's unworthy and she needs to pray to be healed, and if she's good, then God will in some way make her whole again, that's not going to work. But if her starting point is that she is okay, you've got this allness, the harmonious perfection, represented by the circle. So she is an expression of this all power that is already in good shape and harmonious. Her cancer, her disease belongs in the mirror, right? It belongs in the world of fiction. It's Maya. George Harrison, beware of darkness, beware of Maya, which is illusion. And so her cancer belongs in the mirror, in the world of reflection. And if she can see that in the cause, she's not affected by the problem, then there's healing. So if you look around and see change, remembering the pole star, and C.C. Dane talked about how poles, when the pole star was recognized and they created an instrument, people were able to navigate around the globe because they had a point of reference, the pole star. So if our point of reference is perfect allness, the circle, and we operate from there, then there is no problem. But when you look around and see change, if you can recognize that the change that you see is only in the world of reflection, or that it is a reflection, but creation is increased consciousness. And so if we increase our consciousness, we're more knowing. So it's like we're within harmony. We're in harmony. There's a bit in the Lord's Prayer as well. Our Father, which art in heaven. In can mean within. So the Father is within a state of harmony. So when we look at or are involved with something that's harmonious, and I'm thinking of great art, right? I'm thinking of Mark Rothko, for instance, or Howard Hodgkin, where the colours work and the shape works, and there's something powerful contained within the image. So when we look at a painting, let's say a self-portrait by Rembrandt, she's just so good. When we look at a piece of art, that is harmonious. I lost my train of thought there. Okay, that's right. If the Father is within heaven, within harmony. So when we contemplate art or poetry or music, we are part of the harmony, which means we are with the Father in heaven, whatever that might mean. That we regenerate ourselves, we reconnect with the perfection, the harmony that already is, and we're bringing it into focus, right? So that when we contemplate art, let's say, then we're within harmony. So all our parts are arranged correctly. And if you remember the AR from the beginning, our art and arrangement and harmony. So when we are part of harmony, we are harmony, or we share more directly its nature, which is good and perfect. And it can only be good and perfect and unchanging. But it's, if we do this, it's not keeping our fingers crossed or hoping that things will work out well. It's more cooperating with what's true. So I'm thinking about what I would say to this woman. So by all means, continue to pray, but know that you're not asking for something you don't have or something that you need. What you're doing is, by praying, you're confirming the power that you have already, and the power that you have in harmony with, or along with, Leonardo da Vinci and Goethe and Bach and Howard Hodgkin and artists and writers and musicians. Because in the world of reflection, it's about thought. But we don't start from our own, or start from or with our own personal limited mind. We start with wholeness and the all and the circle, which is also a dot, because it's a circle too, even though it's a smaller expression of it. Okay, I don't know what you're going to make of this. I don't know what I make of it, but I'm doing what I'm doing. Okay, so anyway, I'll leave it at that, and tomorrow I'll probably go back to something easier like a tarot card. So thanks for watching. If you have comments or questions, let me know, and we'll see what happens. Okay, have a nice day. Bye-bye. Oh yeah, next time, tomorrow is springtime. Sun goes into Aries. So next time will be a new year. So maybe it's quite appropriate to end this last year with something which is of the nature of the very end of the zodiac, the end of Pisces, the Scorpio decanate. So anyway, I'm rambling now, so I'm going to stop rambling and say goodbye. Goodbye.